Hi everyone, my name is Courtney. I write under the pen names Lyra Parish, and I'm one half of the USA Today best-selling duo Kennedy Fox. And I just wanted to come on here and talk about just different things that have happened over the last 8 years. Today is my 8-year publiversary. On January 11th, 2014, I self-published my first romance book, and I've seen a lot of things change in the industry over the last 8 years. Now the book count is, 44? I think, between Kennedy Fox and my Lyra Parish backlist. And so I was driving today and I was just kind of reflecting on just the different things and different people or situations or opportunities that have essentially brought me to where I am today. And while I warn you guys a lot about the mistakes that I made when I first started publishing, there's no way that I would change those things if I could go back in time. And the reason for that is because you just never know what that one little change would have done and if the same opportunities would have been present. One of the mistakes that I talk about is I did not finish my series before I started working on something else and publishing something else. And I think back to that point in my writing and publishing career, and I was just mentally struggling with trying to finish a series, because when you do your first one, it's very nerve-wracking to finalize it, to end it for good. I think about if I would have actually finished my series and quick released back in the day. I don't know if my series would have done better. Maybe it would have. Maybe I would have been more successful as Lyra Parish, which then would have affected if I was scammed by an MLM. And then I may not have become friends with Brooke, and then Kennedy Fox would not have been born. I like to think back on those specific things in my career and be like, but if I changed it, maybe the whole trajectory of my life would have been different. I'm okay with the mistakes that I've made. Of course, I warn you guys not to make the mistakes I made, but for me it was a learning lesson that I would not take back. I also was reflecting on the different people that have just really helped me in my career, and especially at the beginning of my career. And you guys know that I started off writing young adult fantasy, and I probably would have fit in with more people in the authortube community if I would have stuck with that genre, because you know, romance authors are not prevalent in this space. There are some, but I feel like most people are writing some sort of fantasy type books. When I got out of my publishing contract, I had one of my friends who was super supportive of me writing romance, and sometimes those people come in your life to nudge you in the right direction. And my friend was very successful, made New York Times as a self-published author, had an agent, became hybrid, published for, I think it was Macmillan, made USA Today several times, and just was super, super successful and very supportive of me and my journey. And she just was like, why don't you write romance? Like, I'm doing this, I am finding success with it, I love writing it, and you should try it too. I mean, what does it hurt to try? Without that nudge, I don't know if I would have ever just jumped into romance. I'm so grateful that I had people in my life who did things like that. I have several friends who were with me in my writing journey before I was Lyra Parish, before Kennedy Fox was even a thought in anyone's mind. And I'm friends with several of those people, and I call them my OGs. Like, there are book bloggers that I am still friends with. Recently, I got a notification on my Facebook that I was celebrating my 8-year friendship on Facebook with Rachel Brooks. You guys know her. She does live sprints with me, my Australian friend. And, you know, she was there before I ever press publish on my first book. There is Dee Kelly. He has been my friend for forever. I don't even know when we started talking, how we started talking, how the conversation even started. I just feel like she's just always been there. And I have friends in real life where I don't know when they became my friend, but it just feels like they've always been my friend. I've got this handful of like core people who have just been there since the start of this, and they are still my friends, and I still talk to some of them regularly. You know, we're all busy and it's hard to keep in touch with those people in the beginning, but I was lucky because I had a support system from the start of people who were also newish. I feel like we kind of like grew up in the industry together. I always reflect back to that. People have come and gone. I mean, there are people who I don't even know what their real name was because they were writing under pen names and they just disappeared. They vanished. They stopped publishing, deleted their Facebook, removed their books from Amazon, and then it was like it never happened. And sometimes I have to remind myself that that person really did exist and those books really did exist. I just want to say that publishing is hard, and you know, I do not for 1 second ever take my career and my journey for granted. I'm so grateful that I did not give up because there were times when I wanted to. I mean, I think that all authors go through that at some point in their career, and that's normal. You know, if you didn't reflect and sit down and think how difficult publishing really is and how much work it is, then I don't know if one can fully appreciate it when they get to the point that they've always dreamed of being at. Like, there is no finish line to this. There's no goalpost and there's no ending to this. I hope to be writing for the rest of my life. I'm sure that when my time comes, there will be a manuscript that I was working on that will just not be finished. And that's the story. That's our life. And everyone's publishing journey is different. You have people who release their first book and it goes gangbusters, and then they have to learn how to navigate in a world where everyone is watching them and waiting for them to mess up. I think it's harder as a new author to break out straight out of the gate than it is for someone who builds themselves to that level. All the failures that I have experienced have made me into the author that I am today. It's helped me grow a thick skin. It's taught me what my boundaries are in publishing. I've learned a lot about myself. I've learned that I'm resilient and that I don't give up. And when I set my mind to do something, like, I truly believe it with all of my heart, and I'm gonna do whatever it takes to make that happen. And you guys know that my #1 bucket list item was to quit my corporate job. It's not lost on me at all that I was able to do that and still have the same lifestyle that I have. That I was able to quit when my parents needed me at the absolute most. And you know, if Courtney in 2011 didn't randomly say on a hiking trail to her husband that she was going to write a book, then none of that would have ever happened. I think about that a lot. I'm like, what a random thing. If you're not familiar, if you're new here, I decided to write in March of 2011. Me and my husband went hiking down a trail, and there was a chestnut tree that was in Louisiana that was shipped in by train. There was a historical marker. I read it. I was in this space and there was just like this electrical feeling. I don't know how to even explain it. I sat on the ground and looked out at these trees. I could imagine the trail and the house and the chestnut tree being behind it. And I just looked at Will and I was like, I'm gonna write a book. And he was like, okay, that's random. You're not a writer. I'm like, I know. That's the crazy part, isn't it? And then from that point on, I started writing. And still to this day, I don't know what it was that in that moment, I was like, I'm gonna write a book. But here we are, you know, here we are. It's just, it's weird to think about. You know, I was in my hotel room last weekend and I was eating hummus. This story. I was eating hummus and I was just thinking, like, what would college Courtney think about this moment right now? My books paid for this hotel room and paid for my flight and paid for the clothes that I was wearing and paid for the hummus that I was eating. And I just sat there in that moment and I was like, what would Courtney, that was a struggling, broke-ass college student, think right now if she knew that all of that was going to pay off eventually and that everything was going to be okay? You just never know. Like, and I guess that's the point of this video. You never know. And It's okay to think to yourself like, you know, I'm tired, I am overwhelmed, I am exhausted, I am burnt out. These are all things that happen to all of us. It's okay. It's okay to feel that way. And it's okay to take some time for yourself. But if you really want it, then you just have to keep going. That's it. Like, you just have to keep going. You have to keep learning, because when people become complacent in their careers and they refuse to change covers or rewrite blurbs or change titles or rewrite books that are terrible, or, you know, unpublish backlist items that are just bad for your brand, or to create another pen name. If you are not willing to adapt in an industry that is always changing, you will stay in the same exact place that you're at. I would not be here right now in this very moment if Kennedy Fox would not have been born. And I mean, maybe, you know, I would have written a series that would have taken off if I just would have really stuck to it under Lyra Parish. But I was convinced I needed a new pen name, and I was determined to create one. I met Brooke and we created Kennedy Fox, and the rest is history. Like, I'm so freaking grateful for just everything that's happened, the good and the bad. It was all necessary. In Neil Gaiman's masterclass, he says that he learns more from the failures than he did from the successes. And that's just always stuck with me. Like, really, really deep inside. Like, that stuck with me, because every book that I've published that hasn't sold or didn't do well, or, you know, caught on later, or whatever the case is, there was a lesson there. It's been 8 years. I've published 40 something books. I've lost count at this point. And it's because I refused to quit. I refused to delete my existence off the internet when I was frustrated. I know there are a lot of people out there that work really, really hard, and they just never catch that level of success in the beginning. There was an article that I read a few years ago, and it was about this woman who published 50 books before she made USA Today bestseller. 50 books. Can you imagine? That is essentially, 6 more books than what I've published right now in 8 years. So we can just assume that she was writing 5 to 6 books per year. So a decade is how long it took before that list was made. But it was made, and it was because she was resilient and she refused to give up. I know that it can be frustrating that if you want to quit your job that you can't. You know, my plan was a 5-year goal. It's like, yep, in 5 years, I want to be able to quit my job. And that was in 2011. In 2016 is when I was like, oh, here's my 5-year plan. So I added another 5 years to it, you know, and it took me almost that long, 2020. So yeah, 9 years is how long it took me to be able to quit my job from when I started writing, not when I started publishing. It's good to have a slice of humble pie every once in a while. And I've had a whole humble pie. I've probably had like 3 humble pies. I'm happy for those lessons. Kennedy Fox started off just making a lot of money. Like, as much as my work salary paid me, like in the first real year that we were published. And then we moved to Kindle Unlimited, and I recently did a spreadsheet where I added up all of our payouts, expenses, everything since the beginning of when we started publishing. And when we were in Kindle Unlimited, we were paying 40% in expenses, and we made half of the money that we had made the previous year. It was mind-blowing to see it like that, because I knew it was like that. I just didn't have the actual numbers crunched and laid out like I do now. And that blew my mind. Kindle Unlimited. Yes, I'm gonna start again. That's to say that you have to learn what works for you. There's authors out there that are very adamant about, you have to be in Kindle Unlimited to make money these days. Like, if you're a romance author, you should be in Kindle Unlimited. You'll know that I don't believe that, and that I'm at the other end of the spectrum where I'm like, I hate KU. But I think that there is a time and place for it. I think that it can be very beneficial for some people's brands and books and their entire career, and it can change their entire life. You don't know that until you try it. And it could be a really big mistake, and it could be risky. And that's the risk you have to take when you decide to try things that you've never tried. And sometimes it's scary, and sometimes you could lose $200,000 because you joined Kindle Unlimited. But that's the risk when you're established on all platforms and you decide to get a piece of the Amazon pie. It was a mistake. But now I know that Kennedy Fox's books do not work in Kindle Unlimited, and it will never work in Kindle Unlimited. And our books are for wide platforms, and it took us a few years, but we're finally getting back with our pre-orders to where we were before. 2021 was the best year in Kennedy Fox history. I've made a recap video for that and I just haven't edited it yet. So you know me, I record videos and then re-record them again, which will probably happen. There will be times when you will want to throw in the towel and you will slam that laptop shut and you will walk away. There are points when I just cry because I am an emotional person. I think many of you who watch my channel regularly know that. You know that I'm a super emotional person. And I'm also dramatic. I know that too, but at least I own it, right? There were times when I was just so upset that publishing made me physically sick, that it affected my mental health, that it affected my self-esteem, my self-worth. Like, there were some bad times during my publishing journey, but I realized a lot of that was the comparison game and not feeling worthy to be successful, not putting action steps into place that I knew I needed. After a few years, after several books, you start learning what works and what doesn't. And when you find that thing that works, when you find that genre or that trope or that style of book, a series, a duet series, an interconnected series, a standalone series, like when you find that thing that works for you, it's like magic in a bottle. And you have to remember those moments. You have to remember why something worked and why it did not. And keep those little nuggets of information tucked away and don't forget it. And if you ever get lost, go back to basics, because those things never, ever change. Don't quit. Keep going. I'm happy to be an example of someone who just kept going, even though they weren't successful and they didn't make the bestseller lists with their friends and they were denied signings because they weren't a bestseller. The girl who didn't get picked for anthology projects. All those things where you just feel like you're being left behind. I was that person, and I'm still here and I'm not going anywhere. And my publishing career is going to continue to grow. And things are just going really great. I have a writing partner who is amazing, who works hard, who listens to me complain about God knows what. And I have a lot of friends in my life that have been here from the very beginning, and I don't take any of that for granted. I'm so grateful that this is my career. And I just wanted to share that with you guys today. Like, you have to keep going. You have to keep learning. You have to adapt to the industry. And if you can do those things, and if you are willing to take risks, although it might be a huge mistake, and you keep those nuggets of information that are going to help you continue to grow, then you absolutely will. I just want to thank you guys for being here. It's been 8 years. I'm still kind of like blown away by that. This year will be my 5-year anniversary of being on YouTube, which is so crazy. I honestly thought that I would have been in a different spot of my YouTube career, but you know, whatever. This is just my hobby. Maybe one day I'll turn it into something that's legitimate. But 2017 is when I started this channel. Like, when Kennedy Fox was still in her infancy. I'm so grateful that y'all are here and that y'all listen to me ramble about whatever I want to talk about. So that's all I have. If you have any questions, comments, make sure to leave them down below. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't. Come on, we got goals, y'all. And press that like button like the real YouTubers say. And that's all I have. I hope y'all have an amazing, incredible week. You accomplish all your goals and you write all the words, and I'll see you again in my next video.